What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the power bars from Xiaojun Barbell. Okay, so behind me I have both the M1 and the E1 power bars. Just like the weightlifting training bars that I've already reviewed, the E1 is their kind of like entry-level value barbell, whereas the M1 is the stepped-up barbell that is a little bit nicer, has some nicer features to it, but it's still pretty economical as far as budget goes compared to other barbells. So there are a lot of similarities between these barbells. They both have a 200K PSI tensile strength. They're both obviously 29 millimeters. They both have the 1/2-inch sleeve shoulder, and they're the same length. The coatings are different on these. So with the M1 bar, the biggest difference I'd say is that the fact that this bar is stainless steel. The sleeves on this bar, however, are chrome, just like most stainless steel power bars or just barbells in general. They usually have a chrome sleeve because there is a difference within like mixing metals, like when you slide a bumper plate or a steel plate on, something with the metallurgy creates oxidation on stainless steel. So that's why most people will do a chrome sleeve. And then on the E1 bar, you have a black chrome coating. And the black chrome on this one is not like the E1 training barbell. It's a lot more matte, which I really like about this barbell. And then the sleeves on this have a QPQ coating, which is once again very similar to the M1 training barbell. It's not that far off from the black chrome finish. It's more matte, but it does wear down pretty quickly, as you can kind of see on my sleeve. It shows very well, or shows pretty badly on the black sleeve, whereas the chrome sleeve really doesn't show any kind of wear. I mean, it's got a few marks, but it's not bad. Chrome is very good for scratch resistance. But obviously, if you wanted the more oxidation resistant barbell, you're gonna have to go with the M1. Although I've never really run into any kind of rust here in SoCal with any of my E1 barbells. So another big difference between these two barbells is that the M1 has 0.5 millimeter depth knurling, and then the E1 has 0.4 millimeter depth knurling. I know there's only 0.1 millimeter of difference between both of them, so a 1/10 of a millimeter. But I can tell you that the M1's knurling is a lot more aggressive feeling than the E1's knurling. Maybe it's because my E1 is pretty new and it might still have some shipping grease on it, but the M1, it just feels way more secure in the hand. If I like take my thumb and I try to press it down and just move it across the barbell, it doesn't go anywhere with the M1. But with the E1, I can pretty easily slide it back and forth. So I did notice that pretty prominently when I was doing my CrossFit Total the other day. With the M1, I deadlifted up to 565 with the M1, dual hook grip, no problems. I was actually very surprised that I was able to do that high with dual hook grip, just because I had pretty much just started doing hook grip versus mixed grip. With the E1, I felt like the knurling was a issue, but I only deadlifted to 545 the other day with the E1, and I felt like a part of that was because the grip was just more secure with the M1 barbell. When it comes to like actually measuring the diameter of both of the barbells, they're like just a hair over 29 millimeters, like 29.3 for the M1, and then just a little bit smaller than that with the E1 barbell. So very close to the stated thickness. Another thing that I also really like about these barbells is, yes, they do have center knurling, but the center knurling on these bars is a little bit longer than your standard center knurling. So these are like 6.5 inches long compared to like the 4 3/4 on the Rogue Ohio Power Bar that I have back there, which I just measured. So what that gives you is a much larger contact area with your back. I never really talk about the spin on power bars because it just doesn't really matter. But what I can say is that the sleeves don't spin all that much, which is great. You don't really want them to spin all that much. You do want them to spin a little bit because you obviously don't want them to be stuck, but they don't spin that great. I noticed that the M1 spins a little bit more smoother, a little bit better than the E1, but that might just be because my E1's brand new. The E1 barely spins at all. In terms of flex, I have not noticed these barbells flexing with any of the weights that I'm putting up. The max squat that I did on the M1 was something like 415, 425, something like that. I squatted pretty regularly up to 405 with this bar. I was just doing a squat cycle where I was just pretty much every week squatting up to 405 and not having any issues with the M1. With the E1, I pretty recently just squatted 440, so 200 kilos, and I didn't notice this flexing or bending at all. It stayed stable on my back, had absolutely no issues squatting it as far as like the barbell went. So, I mean, obviously the weight was pretty heavy, but the barbell gave me absolutely no issues. It felt very secure on my back, no problems there. What I did notice was that the plates that I put on the sleeves wanted to slide off if I didn't put any kind of like collars on them. I'm pretty notorious for not using collars on my bars, just because, I don't know, I just don't really care. But the weights that I was putting on my bar, which were Rogue competition plates, were sliding around like crazy on the E1 bar, which it does have some kind of ribbing to the sleeves. It's pretty light ribbing, but I didn't really ever notice that with the M1. And once again, it could be because the E1 is pretty new and might still have that shipping grease on it, but the M1 I never really noticed that issue with. So I felt like if you're planning on using any of these bars without collars, the M1 is probably the way to go versus the E1, but I'm probably a minority there. So both of these bars are 20 kilo bars. When I measured them personally on my scale, they came out at a perfect 20 kilos. Cannot complain about the weight tolerance for either of these barbells. So the difference in price between these barbells, the E1 retails for $289, which is a pretty good price for a high-performing powerlifting bar, whereas the M1 barbell retails for $400. Both of the prices include free shipping, so that's a huge plus from the Xiaojun barbell. That's also assuming that they're in stock in your warehouse, whether it's the West Coast warehouse or the East Coast warehouse. If it's not and you have to get it shipped, then it's a $20 shipping charge, which is still pretty good. With the M1 barbell, you're getting up very close to Rogue's price. I mean, Rogue's price after tax and shipping is probably going to be a little bit closer to $500. I think that bar retails normally at $435, which it's kind of tough to pull people away from the Rogue name, even though I can tell you that the Xiaojun M1 barbell is one of my favorite, if not my favorite power bar at the moment. It's very close between this bar and my stainless steel Ohio power bar. Basement Brandon really likes the M1 power bar. I mean, we've had multiple conversations where he tells me that he really likes the knurling on this bar. And I mean, that guy's a beast. He puts up massive weight. And if you guys aren't subscribed to his channel, make sure that you guys go and check him out right now. But anyways, I do feel like the M1 barbell could be priced a little bit lower if it wants to compete a little bit more seriously with the Rogue barbell, just because just the name in general. Not saying that it's a bad barbell, I'm just saying that the name is probably gonna be the biggest difference maker between the Xiaojun and the Rogue Ohio power bar. As far as performance goes, I'm gonna say that it's pretty much a wash. I like both of the barbells. The knurling on the M1 power bar to me feels more aggressive than the Rogue's knurling. But I do think that the Rogue Ohio power bar's knurling feels better in the hand to me personally. I think it's cut a little bit more uniform. As far as whip and flex go, I don't think there's a huge difference between either of the barbells. They're both very stiff, and I don't think anyone's gonna really notice too much of a difference in terms of how they feel when you're squatting or deadlifting. With the E1 barbell. For an entry-level power bar, I do think that the E1 is pretty good. I do wish that the knurling was a little bit more aggressive. I feel like the knurling is a little bit too subdued on the E1 barbell. I think that people are gonna be okay with it for the price, but if you're asking me, I would spend the extra bit of money and get either the Rogue Ohio Power Bar, which has the same knurling as the stainless steel Ohio Power Bar that I also have, and I think that that knurling is both deeper and it's more well cut than the Xiaojun barbell. But if you're looking for something that has a little bit more knurling than your standard like E1 training bar, your Rogue Ohio bar, then I do think that the E1 is definitely a step up from those barbells. It's just not as aggressive as some of the other power bars in its price range. So if you're asking me which bar I would personally go with, I'd say shell out the extra bit of money if you're serious about powerlifting. You're gonna really like the knurling on the M1 power bar. It's a huge difference between that bar and the E1 bar, which, like I said, is not bad in its own right. I just think that the knurling is a little bit light for a power bar. So I'll leave a link in the description so that you guys can check out either of these bars on luxiaojunbarbell.com. If you guys have any questions about the M1 or the E1 power bar, feel free to leave them in the comment section. If you guys like this video, please hit that thumbs up button. Make sure that you guys are subscribed to my channel for future reviews. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.